Charlie, here's the thing. So much to get through this morning. At Charlton Athletic, when the news came through the other day about the scrapping of FA Cup replays is going to become a reality, did you guys know this was in the pipeline? Did you know this was coming along, this announcement?
No, I mean, not at all. It was sort of put on the table last summer when the Premier League and the Football League were having their discussion about, a redistribution of financial revenue, and there was a sort of a number landed at by the Premier League chief executive, Richard Masters, and he said, well, look, I might be able to get this across my clubs if you give us a whole load of stuff in return. And a bunch of that stuff was put on the table in front of us. Effectively, the bosses at the Football League said to the Football League club owners and chief executives, look, I think we can get you this extra money, but you're going to have to give some stuff up that you're not going to like. There's some strings attached. So we started having that discussion about those strings. And then really before the whole thing reached fruition, Richard Masters, the Premier League chief executive, went back to his clubs and said, look, I think we've got this deal, but I've got various things, back from the Football League for you. And the Premier League chief executive said, what? You're going to give some money to the Football League? What? That's our money? What are you doing? Yeah, but I've got these other things. Forget the other things. We'll get those as well. Don't worry. We always get those as well. We always get what we want in the end. But please don't give them any of our money. You must not. And that is basically what happened. So these, of course, our view is that all the things that we had been giving up, potentially, or discussing giving up, were now off the table. What we didn't know was that the Football Association, which is effectively a small department of the Premier League, was actually doing a deal behind our backs to actually give up something on our behalf and then just present it back to us as saying, well, you haven't got any more money, but we have given this up. Now, you want to sort of look at this particular incident about the scrapping of replays in isolation. This is the latest in a long line of humiliations heaped upon the FA Cup by the Premier League with the connivance of the FA. This has been going on a long time. So you can say, well, not playing FA Cup games on a Saturday, it's a small enough thing. Well, not having replays, it's a small enough thing. Well, not having the final at the end of the season, it's a small enough thing. But when you add the entire thing up, what you're doing is you are systematically diminishing and ultimately destroying the oldest and best cup competition in the world, in my view. Other people might see it differently, but I see there are three things in English football which really, really make English football special and which got me hooked as a young kid. Right, the first thing is, fair enough, is the competitiveness, the competitiveness of the top division. Our top division is competitive, other leagues is not competitive.
True.
This is really important.
True.
A meaningful promotion and relegation from that league, which again is something that's being chipped away at. The second thing is the strength of the pyramid that lies underneath it. Again, something that other countries don't have and would kill for. That's really important. And the third thing is the FA Cup. Those three things we have and other countries don't have.
Charlie,
and other countries would love to have it. And all I care about is protecting those three things.
Yes. You cannot argue against that, Simon, can you?
No. There's a lot of validity in what Charlie's saying. There's a lot of validity. But that genie's out of the bottle. That genie came out of the bottle in 1992 when the Premier League decided to form itself. Because the Football League was what it was, the FA decided to become what it's become, which was not do the job of de facto regulator, and has now made itself, just as Charlie quite rightly sums up, a department in the Premier League, and ultimately someone that works with Nike on changing St George's crosses. That's what the FA's become. But we are in a situation now where the uniqueness and the success of the Premier League has been compounded by the incompetence and inadequacies in other functions. The Football League has been poor for a long time in its management. I think you've probably got two of its most capable operators in its history, in Trevor Birch and Rick Parry, operating now. And the FA haven't done their job. But you've got a Premier League which is remarkably successful. Now you've got a tool that I don't like, which is the independent regulator. I like it for the stalking horse it can be utilised for, to be able to redistribute a bit more equitably. Yeah. But I don't like it for all the other things it will bring.
Right. I mean, Charlie, to you, what was more offensive? The decision to scrap the replays or the fact there was seemingly no consultation?
I think you have to take the two together, because without caring about the first, then the second bit doesn't matter. And they can discuss all sorts of things and not discuss it with us, and there's nothing much I can say about that. But when it's something that is central to the game as a whole, and don't forget the vast majority of clubs who enter the FA Cup are not Premier League clubs. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of clubs that enter. And for the majority of the rest of us, the FA Cup is very important, whereas the Premier League clubs, it's less important. So if you are at the FA thinking about what to do with the FA Cup, you need to be speaking to the majority of clubs for whom that competition is absolutely crucial, not just in revenue terms, but also in terms of the passion of the game. I mean, Jim, I just want to just tell you about how I first really became a passionate football fan. I'd been taken in the 80s by my granddad to Oxford United. He was a farmer. He'd been involved in the club when it was Headington United, and he took me to watch Oxford United when they were in the top division in those days. Eventually, I started to go on my own, and the FA Cup tie that really got me fanatically into football was a time about 1992 when Oxford played against Leeds, who were the then top division champions, at the Manor, 2-2, back up to Welham Road. Game swung both ways, ended up Oxford winning 3-2 in the last minute of that replay with a 30-yarder from our young left winger, Chrissy Allen. I was then chased down the street by crowbar-wielding thugs all the way to the railway station, and it was the most amazing day of my life. And ever since then, I've been a passionate football fan. Right. So FA Cup replays matter. They do matter as part of the bigger thing, which is that the FA Cup matters.
Yes.
And every time that we chip away at the FA Cup, we're losing something much more precious than you can imagine. The reason this is happening is that the people who run the clubs in the Premier League, or many of them, I should say, don't have that history in the game. They don't understand all this thing. They ultimately would like it to be a franchise league. Because don't forget, when I say the competitiveness of our top division is really important, don't forget that a whole bunch of the Premier League club owners wanted to destroy all that with the European Super League. So even their own league, they don't really care all that much about. All they care about is the capital value of their own clubs, and they want to make their own clubs as valuable as possible. And what those of us, the rest of us in the game, whether it be Simon and you on this show, or me at an EFL club, or the FA in theory should be, but certainly the Football League, which as Simon said is ably led these days, probably for the first time in an awful long time, we've got to try and be the defenders of this precious fabric of English football, because it takes decades and decades to build up, but only one or two bad decisions to tear down. So
it's not over, Charlie? It's not over. I mean, Andy Holt, I think at Actions and Stanley, is calling on EFL clubs to boycott the Cup in protest. Dara McAntony, who's more than an able substitute for this man, live on talkSPORT.
I don't know about that.
At Peterborough United. Dara McAntony was seething the other day about this, just as you are, but very articulately you put your case together there, Charlie. Is there anything else you can do? The decision's been made.
Well, I mean, a decision has been made, and ultimately there are now discussions being had in the corridors of power. Not discussions by me, but nonetheless, as somebody involved with an EFL club, you are told about the discussions that are happening. And then we also have the advent of the independent football regulator. Now, the football regulator has three tasks as it's currently going. It's in Parliament today, being debated in Parliament today for the first time.
Indeed.
Number one, to reduce football club financial distress. That's their number one task. Number two, to protect the cultural assets of English football. Number three, to promote the interests of fan engagement. Now, for me, preserving and protecting and enhancing the FA Cup covers all three of those. It helps reduce football club distress because it's a key source of revenue for lots of football clubs outside the Premier League. It's a key cultural asset, broadcast around the world and admired by other jurisdictions all over the world. And it's absolutely massive with fans. I came up to London on Saturday to go to the Valley on the train with a whole bunch of City, Chelsea, Coventry fans all up for the weekend for FA Cup games. And do you know what? Even the fans of the big clubs know how big the FA Cup is. The fans know it, just as they did with the Super League. It was the fans of the Big Six who killed the Super League. Let's not forget that. So this is not about the fans of big clubs against small clubs. Most of us feel the same way. Most of us really care about the FA Cup.
So, Charlie, you feel that the regulator should cover the remit of the FA Cup?
Well, I think the FA Cup is clearly a key cultural football asset. There's no way around that. Yeah. So I think ultimately any attempt to destroy either the pyramid or the FA Cup comes under the IFR's remit for sure.
I mean, I'm looking at the messages coming in here. This man, Charlie Methven, is known to, you're known obviously to Sunderland fans, to Charlton fans, Charlie, and others. But many don't know you. This fella is talking sense. I'm sure Simon has to agree. Do you agree with what Charlie is saying?
I agree with the values of the FA Cup. I agree with the values of the EFL Cup. I don't listen to Methven and his nonsense about disbanding the EFL Cup, which is a major revenue generator, which is a property owned by the Football League. But I'm also a pragmatist and a realist, and understand the direction of travel, and you've got to get the balance right. And I know, and despite the protestations that Charlie may wish to advance, if the 72 EFL clubs are sat down And there's a trade-off mentality of, well, look, we want to get rid of things like FA Cup replays, but we're going to give you a better distribution deal from the TV broadcast revenues. Every one of those clubs, besides those that are being a bit pious, will take the revenue, because anyone that's writing a business plan that projects for FA Cup replays in their business plan is a bloody fool, because you don't. You write a third-round FA Cup and you write a first-round League Cup, or whatever way you do in your business plans. I want to protect the value, but the direction of travel is about every story I've heard besides this soliloquy from Charlie, which is right, from football fans reeling into the shows. This FA Cup replay paid for my academy. This FA Cup replay paid for my training ground. So it's about money. I thought it was about replays. It's about the money that the replays generate. Okay, well, if there's a distribution deal that you weapon... And I think the Premier League have played into the EFL's hands. They've showed people what a bunch of bureaucrats they are and how they dictate the policy. The FA have come in the line like the demented poodle that they are, and I think it's great for the independent regulator, which I think is a loathsome object, but it will be utilisable to get distributions. And all of these clubs will go, I tell you what, we'll lose the FA Cup replay because we're getting £2 million a year.
Do you agree with that, Charlie? Just before I ask you something, do you agree with what you're saying there?
There's an awful lot of truth in what Simon says. I think the only difference between us is I don't think it's an either or. I think we need to look for both. I think we need to look for financial distribution, not because we're greedy or want more money, but because actually the government's own report says that current financial distribution is inequitable. That's the reason why, right? And it's causing problems throughout the football pyramid. So put that to one side. I'm very confident that the independent football regulator will come to the same conclusion that Tracy Crouch MP came to, and the same conclusion that the government's own white paper came to, which is that it is inequitable as things currently stand. That's that. On the other side, we've got protection of cultural assets like the FA Cup, built up over decades and decades, and then chipped away at to the point where the foundations of that building are now not as strong as they should be.
It's a fair observation. The irony of the inequitability observation from the EFL is that they will then inequitably distribute the league amongst themselves. So when they get the money from the Premier League, they'll give 80% or now 75% to one league and 25% between the other two leagues. So they'll follow the model of inequitability. There's the hypocrisy of it all.
Charlie,
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.